Okay, hey, it's Stefan Kinsella. I'm going to do a quick rant about China and IP theft. I think this will be Kinsella on Liberty episode 460, I believe. I'm just on my patio today because the weather's not gotten terrible yet in Houston. Yeah, one of my followers wanted me to fisk some of these nonsense talking points about China and IP theft, and I don't have time to fisk it and go through it and intersplice videos, but I just thought I'd give a few thoughts on this instead of waiting for someone to interview me about this for a podcast or something. Okay, so this was sparred by, well, for me, it was sparred. There was this recent, this is very common. You hear this all the time. Almost everyone, basically, except for anti-IP, Rothbardian, proprietarian, libertarians, gets confused about IP, and they think IP is a real thing. You know, it's a legitimate type of law, and they're against IP theft, as they call it. Okay, so, but you hear this every politician, Trump, Democrats, Republicans, even the so-called libertarians, when like Massey and I think Rand Paul, no one is against IP. I'm not aware of any congressman in the history of the U.S. Congress, even Ron Paul, who's ever been against IP. After all, it's in the Constitution, blah, blah, blah. But you hear this over and over and over again, repeatedly over the last several years. China is stealing our IP. I mean, number one, it's an insult to China to keep calling them a thief. And it just displays a ignorance and a confusion about what property rights are, what IP is, and what China is doing. So I'm just going to unpack this. So I did a post on my C4SIF blog the other day about Daniel Lacal, a Spanish Austrian guy who said something about China steals intellectual property. Okay, so that's a common view. Most Austrians maybe are not running around saying that, but this guy did. And I have a post where I explain why he's confused. And the All In podcast, you know, these mainstreamer guys, Friedberg, David Sachs, Chamath, Jason Calacanis. I mean, you know, Friedberg starts rambling about, he says he's most worried about the thing he's most worried about with the tariffs from Trump, the war with China, the tariff war with China. The thing he's most worried about is that China might just start ignoring IP rights, and I guess he says take American IP rights and like make copies and sell them all around the world. Totally confused, as I explained in my blog post on c4sif.org. It's not how IP works. You know, China can't just take a copy of Microsoft Office or something, or Adobe Acrobat, and sell it in Europe or America, because those countries have copyright law and they would prevent it. And China has copyright law, so you can't even do it in China unless China abolishes their own copyright law, which they're entitled to do because they run their country. They've agreed to abide by certain international treaties because American and Western pressure, like patent treaties and trademark treaties and copyright treaties, which I call IP imperialism. Let's see what else recently. And then there was a episode of Piers Morgan with some of these guys, like some guy named Gordon Chang, pontificating Cenk Uygur. They're all, or especially this guy Gordon Chang, who's whining about he's got a new book called Plan Red, China's Project to Destroy America. I actually looked through the book. Hint, I didn't buy it, but I didn't see anything about intellectual property in there. But he's got other shows where he talks about this, and he talked about it here. You know, he's going on about China stealing hundreds of billions of dollars of American intellectual property, whatever that means. I mean, there's so many confusions about this. Let me just try to clear a few of them up here. First of all, I'm not going to go through it here, but you can check my site. Intellectual property, namely, let's talk about patent and copyright. Those are the main forms of IP, intellectual property, and they're all illegitimate, especially those two. They do a lot of damage. They basically are grants by the government that give control rights to other people on how people use their property. Like a copyright is a negative servitude or negative easement that allows the holder to tell someone they can't use their factory to publish a book, to print a book. So it clearly violates the First Amendment, freedom of speech and freedom of the press, but the courts don't care. Patents give the holder of the patent the right to go to court to get an order against someone telling them they can't use their factories to make a widget, right, if it violates the patent. So basically, patent and copyright are negative easements. And what's different about them and other negative easements, which are legitimate if they're done voluntarily and consensually, like they're used in neighborhood associations and restrictive covenants, things like that, homeowners associations where the neighbors have a negative right to prevent people from building a certain type of house. Those are fine if they're agreed to, as I pointed out many times before. The problem is the government just grants these negative easements to people in the form of patents and copyrights, and they're not consented to by the people affected by them, by what's called a burdened estate. So they're non-consensual, and that's why they're a taking of property rights. That's what's wrong with IP. Predictably, this government intervention reduces innovation, distorts the market, reduces free speech. Anyway, so IP laws are bad. That's how libertarians view it, especially principled Rothbardian, anarcho-capitalist, Austrian-influenced libertarians and most left libertarians, because they're opposed to monopolies and they think this is one type of monopoly. Okay, but that's the point. Anyway, so the point is, there's several confusions when people accuse China of stealing IP. Okay, number one, even the Supreme Court, like in this case Dowling, says that, look, the word is infringement. It's not stealing. So if you copy someone's patented product and make a copy of it or a duplicate, that is infringement, or it could be infringement. Or if you copy someone's book without their permission, that is a copyright infringement. But that's because the government made up these laws and they call them infringement. But they're not stealing. They're not theft, and they're not stealing. They're copying. So the law makes copying a tort or an offense or an actionable claim. We shouldn't do that. It's the outcome of legislation and the positive law. But it's just not theft. It's never called theft. That's not technically what it is. So when people call copying something theft, it's just dishonest or ignorant. It's not piracy. Piracy is when pirates on a boat jump onto your boat and they take your boat and they kill people. That's real piracy. Theft is when you take someone's thing without their permission and they don't have it anymore. That's theft. Ripping off is the same thing. Stealing is the same thing. So people use these loaded pejorative terms dishonestly to imply that copying, which is itself not a loaded term and not pejorative, to imply that there's something wrong with copying, and to make you believe that the IP laws, which basically prohibit copying, are justified because they're just stopping theft. They also mix in things that are not related, like they'll say plagiarize. Copyright infringement has nothing to do with plagiarism because it has nothing to do with attribution. As an example, if I write a term paper in college and I quote 7 pages of Moby Dick or the Bible and I pretend I'm the author, that's plagiarism, but it's not copyright infringement because the Bible and Moby Dick are no longer protected by copyright. And by the same token, if I publish an identical copy of Harry Potter by J.K. Rowling, it's not plagiarism. I'm not pretending to be J.K. Rowling. I'm not pretending to be the author. I'm just selling a copy of it. Or if I make a smartphone that is too similar to the patented iPhone, I'm not plagiarizing anything, and I'm not defrauding anyone. I'm not pretending to be Apple. So people mix in these things that have negative connotations like plagiarism and fraud. Just they mix them all together. And it's no surprise they mix them together. They're too stupid to even know the difference between the different types of IP that they support, like trademark, trade secret, patent, and copyright. They mix them all together. I just had a debate not a debate, but I was on a panel in Guatemala. I've got the shirt on now. A panel in Guatemala where one of the commentators, Warren Arbach, argued for an objectivist or Randian case for IP, and he had something about how if you copy a book, it violates the patent. I mean, patents don't cover books. Copyright covers books. So here you got someone who's apparently in favor of IP, but he doesn't even know the difference between these things. How can you be in favor of of a statutory scheme that prima facie violates property rights when you don't even know the difference. I mean, I think you have an obligation to know what you're talking about. In any case, so that's the first mistake. China doesn't steal IP. At most, China or Chinese companies infringe IP. Okay, so that's number one thing. But number two, it's not China, it's Chinese companies. So why do we say China? Now, there's no doubt that China as a state probably engages in industrial and other forms of espionage, but then so do American companies and so does the U.S. government. The U.S. government does lots of espionage. So, and that has nothing to do with patent and copyright. Nothing. It might be a way to get people's secrets, which are sometimes covered by trade secret law. But that's another matter, and that's the U.S. is equally guilty of these types of things. So what people are really talking about is they have this impression that in China and in other countries outside the West and outside the U.S. especially, piracy, as they call it, which means basically the availability of unlicensed copies of, say, movies and songs and software is rampant and widespread. Which may be true to some extent. It's true even in the U.S., it's especially since the... All right, well, this is very annoying. I keep getting interrupted, and I recorded... So I'm doing this in 3 segments because when I recorded this second segment, I lost it. So I'm redoing it, and then I recorded a final segment, which was recorded before this one. This is what happens when people keep ringing the doorbell and calling me and pestering the living hell out of me. And when I forget to put Do Not Disturb on my phone, I guess. I mean, I'm just outside today because it's a Friday, the 18th, April 18th, and it's a fairly nice day, and it's about to get hot in Houston, so I'm having a pipe while I can. I think it was closing up. But what I was saying about piracy was that you have piracy. Now, that's the wrong word to use, of course, but I'm going with the word other people use. Selling unauthorized copies of things, music or movies or software for copyright and, say, inventions, I guess, that are covered by patents. Mostly people are talking about copyright or trade secrets sometimes. But the point is, just like the U.S. has bad laws like tax laws and the drug war and conscription and putting you in prison if you, violate, if you refuse to comply with these things, and it also has IP laws, which in the case of patents are mostly civil. In other words, there's a damage. You can sue someone for copyright for patent damages if they infringe your patent, not steal, not knock off, but if they infringe your patent. Infringe means you make, use, sell, or import a device which is substantially similar to that claimed in an issued patent. Okay, that's what it means. And in the case of copyright, if you copy, which means a literal copy or a substantially similar copy or a derivative work. So, like if I copy a novel, that'd be a copy. If I make a similar novel that's too similar, that'd be a copy, but a substantially similar copy. One's called literal infringement or literal copy, and one's substantially similar. But even if I make a movie, let's say I write a sequel to a novel, that's not a copy, but it's called a derivative work. So that's also part of the right of copyright, one of the copyright rights. Or if I make a movie or a translation of a book, or if I make a movie based upon your book, none of those are copies, but they're still derivative works, which are covered also by copyright. Now, if you do any of those things, you're a copyright infringer, and you can be sued for damages, and not just actual damages, which again shouldn't exist in the law, but for what's called statutory damages. That's like $175,000 or $150,000 per infringing act, which is why there's a a post on my site, but John Tehranian did this study where he concluded that every American citizen is liable for about over $3 billion a year in damages for copyright infringement, just from normal things we do because of the insane statutory damages in the law. And we also have criminal damages. I mean, one guy went to prison for a year for uploading the Wolverine movie. I mean, we have criminal penalties for this too, similar to what they used to do in France. I mean, they would kill people for making the wrong kind of button that would violated some manufacturer's trade right or something like that. The U.S. enforces patent and copyright with draconian enforcement, in other words. Other countries have similar systems, and they may not be as draconian, but the point is, no matter how draconian your laws are to enforce unnatural, arbitrary, and unjust, non-objective laws made up by statute by a bunch of congressmen just issuing decrees like they're God, you can't enforce it 100%. You never can. And the government doesn't even want to. They just want to have enough fear behind their ability to have discretion to go after whoever they want to. The point is, the U.S. doesn't enforce its copyright 100%. Neither does China, because no one can and no one wants to, or no one can. And the point is, now that we have copyright piracy being widespread because of the internet and encryption and file sharing, it's almost impossible. It's basically impossible to stop copyright infringement. So even the U.S. doesn't stop at all because it can't. So to accuse China of not having a perfect IP enforcement system is just hypocritical, because no one does or can. The U.S. doesn't and can't and never will. And that's a good thing. It's a good thing that copyright, the technology has basically made copyright almost a dead letter, except for institutions. And hopefully 3D printing will someday mature and enable us to print complicated gizmos in our basement printers like iPhones and computers without anyone's effing permission. But for now, patents are still enforced and do the most damage, I believe. But the point is, China has a working IP system. They have patents and copyrights, trademarks and trade secrets, just like other countries do. And if you file a patent in China and you have a local property right in China called a patent right, and if someone infringes it, you can sue them, take them to court, and sue them for damages. Whether it's easier to get away with it there, I don't know, but it's certainly not something you can just ignore. There's a reason companies do spend money on patent lawyers like me to file patents in China. There's a reason, because you can use them. Okay, so China has a patent system and a trademark system. So again, as I mentioned earlier, I believe what everyone's talking about is trade secret theft. It's not patent theft, and it's not copy, because you can't. First of all, theft is the wrong term. It's infringement. So China is not an IP thief. Some Chinese companies are IP infringers, just like some American consumers are IP infringers because they ignore copyright, because they get pirated copies of things without permission, and the government can't stop them. Same thing in China. So China is not an IP thief. Some Chinese people ignore IP law, which is a good thing. And companies have to do business in China, they have to employ Chinese people. And they sometimes have to partner with Chinese firms. They know this going in there. They know that there's a risk that some people there in your factory might take a snap of an iPhone design and leak it, and it might leak before you want, or some other type of device. There may be a knockoff made because by another Chinese factory because the secret leaks. But trade secret leaking, violation of non-disclosure agreements and employment agreements, is just a matter of contract law, and it's just the nature of the risk of relying upon a proprietary trade secret as part of your business model. That's just the risk in the world. I mean, there's no way. Once a secret leaks, by the way, it's no longer a trade secret. Once it becomes publicly known, even if someone violated a contract to do that, then the trade secret is lost, and trade secret protection is lost under the law, and it's no longer a secret. Anyway, that's enough for now. I'm going to go let the me in part 3, which I recorded earlier, conclude this. Okay, I'm going to finish up here. Apparently, I can't go 5 minutes without someone ringing the doorbell, wanting a package delivered, or ask some stupid question. Apparently, they don't want me to do this podcast. They don't want me to. Anyway, long and short, China, unfortunately, has a working patent and copyright system and trademark system. And as far as I know, a trade secret system. It's not 100% efficient. Neither is America's. Thank God, thank God. China could not just ignore IP law and sell copyrighted stuff or even patented stuff to other countries that do have patents and do have copyright systems. Unfortunately, that's not a good thing. It's a bad thing. And there's no sign that China will ever get rid of its IP law because it also probably buys into the stupid myth of IP. They're maybe not as religious about it as Americans, but in fact, there's some book that I like called, the title is an ancient Chinese saying. It's something like, to steal an idea is an elegant curse. Or no, an elegant offense. So, they're wiser than we are in the sense of realizing there's nothing wrong with copying people. It's kind of a compliment when you copy people. And from economic and a liberty point of view, it's a good thing that people are free to copy and emulate and learn and compete with other people. That's how the human race, advances. How we learn, how we compete, how we advance, how we progress. So to the extent there's any so-called theft, and it's not theft, it'd be infringement. It's trade secret infringement, or it's It's really contract breach, or it could be actual trespass, which is already a crime. But basically, it's the fact that Western companies they're forced to hire local Chinese citizens as employees and to sometimes partner or joint venture with local Chinese companies, and that makes the risk of their trade secrets being divulged greater. But that's just the nature of having a trade secret and relying upon it and taking the risk of in a country, a foreign country, which is a risk that apparently Apple and others are willing to take. So I think we should stop attacking China, and it'd be better if we got rid of our IP and we encouraged China to get rid of theirs instead of chastising them for not having draconian jail sentences for copyright infringement like we do. All right, ta-ta for now.